Good. Good morning and welcome to the Senate Executive Departments and Administration Committee's meeting of March 16th, 2022. We're going to open the day by opening the public hearing on House Bill 91 FN and recognize prime sponsor, Representative Abbas. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is I'm Representative Darrell Abbas. I represent Rockingham County District 8. And I just want to thank everyone for being here today. And before I get into the context of the bill, I think it's important to explain what inspired me to even file this. In my first term, as a member of the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, we were on a tour of the facility where they train firefighters, and it was disclosed while we were there, the high rate of suicide amongst first responders. And at the time, it was, I believe it was 2019, and in the state of New Hampshire, 8 first responders passed away by suicide. And it kind of got me thinking that a lot of that is contributed towards PTSD, which suicide is a symptom or byproduct of PTSD. And I know recently we created presumptions in the law for cancer under the workers' comp, that if a firefighter were to have cancer, that it would be a presumption that that was related to their line of duty. And considering the high rate of PTSD amongst first responders, I didn't see why we wouldn't extend that same rationale to suicide. Some of the comments I would hear is that, well, sometimes that person may be having difficulty in their marriage or substance abuse issues. Well, sabotaging personal relationships also a byproduct of PTSD, as is substance abuse. So I was saying that that's only proving the point that I'm trying to make. I've heard some other comments about this policy. Some people suggest that it would encourage suicide, and I understand the rationale for that. I disagree with that. If I thought that there was any truth to that, I would never obviously file such a bill. Just from a pure equitable perspective, a person's more valuable alive. We're talking about a one-time line of duty death benefit for the surviving family. So that person would provide more economic advantage to their family if they were alive. So that argument, I don't find that to be very persuasive. Also, someone who's struggling, going through that in their life, they're not thinking about the economic advantage of suicide. And unfortunately, this is really to address the first responders that we could not help. And I know the state's moving in the direction of trying to help first responders as much as they can. And we saw the numbers even go down. I believe in the last, if you see the fiscal note from this bill was actually filed last term. It did pass in the House by a vote of 275 to 41. When it made it over to the Senate, it did not get acted on because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The fiscal note now is it's actually lower. It's because that has to do with the less first responders passing away by suicide. So the note actually went down by about $300,000. But I would believe that it would be important to still take into consideration that this policy is really to help the families for the first responders that we just overlooked. I know a lot of people who struggle with PTSD. It's an internal struggle. They don't necessarily broadcast it, and it's not always identified right away. I know there's a lot of efforts to help identify it, and that's the major goal. That's priority number one. But for the ones that unfortunately are overlooked through no fault of anyone, this is to really help the families of who lost a loved one. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative, are you aware that the Senate also passed a bill dealing with extending death benefits to first responders that die from suicide?
I'm aware. I wasn't clear if it has been passed in the Senate or not.
Yes.
I know there was a bill.
Yes.
And I would be supporting that bill as well if it were to come up for a vote in the
Okay.
House as well.
Because I believe we also included our corrections folks, correction officers as well. So,
And in regards to correctional officers, if there was an amendment to HB 91, I would certainly support that. I know that there was a floor amendment proposed in the House when this came up for a vote, and that floor amendment did not pass. I would just point that out for perspective. I think maybe one idea would be to let, if this were to pass and become signed into law, maybe adding correctional officers as a standalone. I don't mean in disrespect to correctional officers. A family member of mine is a correctional officer, and one of their close friends that they would do a lot of transports with passed away from suicide. So that hits home. And I know to this day, my family member, that still is something that weighs on them very heavily.
okay. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you very much.
See, the chair will call Lynn Cusack. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Lynn Marie Cusack, and I am the Director of Professional Standards at the New Hampshire Department of Corrections. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today regarding House Bill 91. As Representative Albus just indicated, that there was a floor amendment that was put forward to include corrections officers in the bill to provide the benefits to our correction, not only our officers, but our correctional line staff. We presented testimony to you both, we sent it to you yesterday afternoon, and then I gave out the hard copy this morning. The evidence suggests that corrections officers also suffer from severe post-traumatic stress relative to some of the things that they see and do in our corrections facilities. A Massachusetts study that came out in 2020 indicated that in Massachusetts, the corrections officers suffer at 12% higher rate than an ordinary citizen post-traumatic stress and have either attempted or fulfilled the act of suicide. One of the things that we see is that our officers still suffer from emotional stress that comes with the job. And as you see and heard from Representative Albus, that anecdotally, individuals are still suffering and committing the act of suicide who are in the corrections department. In 2020, the federal government passed a law. The FBI is to collect data on suicide. So it's not only a New Hampshire or a Northeast type of issue that is arising, but it is a nationwide issue. In 2022, there's some legislation that is out about post-traumatic stress for law enforcement, including corrections officers in the U.S. Congress. So if that passes, then some other remedies will be available to corrections officers as well. So we believe that corrections officers should be included in House Bill 91 and thank the Senate for including them in the bill that has already passed on death benefits. I will be talking about on the next bill as well. And one of the issues in that bill, and I'll say it now, is if that bill passes, we don't need the same language that we're suggesting here, because it broadens the scope of how law enforcement is defined. And if that definition is broadened in, it's House Bill 1319, I believe, is the,
Yes.
1319, if that definition is expanded as we've suggested, we don't need a specific expansion here as well. If that one fails, we would need the expansion. If there's no questions,
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you. Okay, the chair will call Russell Conti. Good morning, Mr. Conti.
Good morning, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. My name is Russ Conti. I'm a retired major from State Police, 32 years of service. I currently serve as the mental health coordinator for the Department of Safety, Division of State Police. I also chair the State Suicide Prevention Council, and I'm currently the president of the board of directors for NAMI New Hampshire. In my current position, I oversee peer services and a lot of the mental health assets that the Department of Safety has had that we freely share with everyone else. And I think anecdotally, I just wanted to say today on this bill, first, I commend everybody for all their support, what's been done in the Senate already. And you're going to hear from a lot of people that have a tremendous amount of experience and interest in this. But for me, I just want to make a couple of points clear. Number one is, it is a factually based assumption right now that we have a post-traumatic stress problem within the first responder community. That's been around for a long time. Unfortunately, it has only really been within the last decade that we have wrapped our heads around it to have the services that are necessary for these people. Prior to that, and when I started my career, 36 years ago, those resources didn't exist at all, barely existed in the first 20 years that I was on the job. So we have some things happening right now that are quite pivotal. But I think the thing that is most important to me is to assess how post-traumatic stress leads people to have suicidal ideations. And when they get to that point, when they're in crisis, what are they really concerned about? I will assure you of this, having talked to survivors of attempts, having talked to people that I've intervened in personally with peer counselors, getting people to clinical help, where I have been the one intervening in the crisis, and they have had suicidal ideations and shared that with me. Not one has ever looked at this as a way to make money. Not one has ever looked at this as a way to somehow fund a family crisis. They are in emotional pain. They are suffering from a mental illness that is treatable, that they can get through it, they can come back to work and go on with a life, but they do not have the coping skills right now to do that. It's the last thing that they're thinking about. So I take some slight to hearing, some of the attitudes, out in the world here that kind of relate this to kind of something that leads people to see some type of monetary benefit that they wouldn't already get. The other connection is clear to be made. I appreciate everything that's been done, and I would offer myself for any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Representative. Mr. Conti. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the chair will call Ken Norton.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Ken Norton, and I'm testifying personally. I'm from Tilton, New Hampshire. By way of background, I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker in New Hampshire, and I spent the last 20 years immersed in the world of suicide prevention. I led the development of NAMI New Hampshire's Connect Suicide Prevention Program, which is trained in over 40 states. And I've served as a subject matter expert for the Department of Defense, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the VA, and others. And I've provided multiple briefings at the Pentagon, specifically focused on how effective suicide response to suicide deaths can reduce risk for suicide and promoting healing for families. I was part of a team that developed the suicide prevention curriculum for the U.S. Marines, and I presented on suicide prevention and response to suicide in 6 countries, including leadership of the Police Service of Northern Ireland. Closer to home, I've trained law enforcement off and on for over 30 years. And in 2008 began at the police academy talking about suicide of police and their higher rates of PTSD and depression. Collaborated with the New Hampshire National Guard on establishing protocols for responding to suicide deaths, and I drafted the legislation in 2008 which established New Hampshire's State Suicide Prevention Council, and I served as a member until this past January. I also served on the commissions on post-traumatic stress disorders and first responders until January, and also served on the governor's Law Enforcement Accountability, Community, and Transparency Commission. I strongly support this bill. more law enforcement officers die by suicide than in the line of duty, although we don't talk about it much. And it's less clear for the data for fire and EMS, but it's certainly a significant issue. What's really very clear is that first responders have higher rates of depression and PTSD, which left untreated can lead to suicide. New Hampshire has certainly seen our own share of tragic suicides of first responders during the last few years. And every suicide is a tragedy. I'd like to read a quote which I think is really meaningful to me and which I've used a lot in suicide prevention training. It's by the Reverend Ron Rolheiser. And he says, "A person dying of suicide dies as does the victim of physical illness or accident against his or her will. People die from physical heart attacks, AIDS, and accidents. Death by suicide is the same, except that we are dealing with an emotional heart attack, emotional stroke, emotional AIDS, emotional cancer, and an emotional fatality." For over 10 years, the U.S. Department of Defense policy is to pay death benefits for a suicide death of a service member. It's not narrowly interpreted to mean that they were on duty at the time of their death. And service members' group life insurance, which is an optional life insurance benefit available to service members, also pays death benefits for a suicide death. After a brief waiting period, sometimes months or perhaps up to a year, commercial life insurance policies also typically pay benefits after a suicide death. There's no evidence that paying a death benefit to families after a suicide death increases anyone's risk for suicide. In fact, anyone contemplating suicide who is thinking rationally would recognize the death benefit paid to their families would amount to a pittance compared to the lost income over the course of their career. As a country, we recognize, celebrate, and support the important role and sacrifices made by the families of our service members. Although our first responders also risk their lives every day, which is a reality not lost on their family, there's much less support for the sacrifices their families make to help keep our communities safe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. HB 91 is part of an effort to change the culture of our first responder communities by increasing the recognition of their own mental health vulnerabilities and increasing their timely access to effective mental health treatment. In the rare instances when we fail to do that, it's also about supporting the families and loved ones of our first responders. I urge you to support HB 91 and vote it as ought to pass, and certainly would support the inclusion of corrections officers in that. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Norton. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. The chair will call Holly Stevens.
Madam Chair and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is Holly Stevens, and I am the Public Policy Director at NAMI, New Hampshire. I won't take up much of your time because I think that there's a lot of folks behind me that have a lot more personal things to say regarding this than I could bring to you. I did provide my written testimony, and I would like to say that NAMI New Hampshire strongly supports this legislation. We supported Senate Bill 227 as well. And I just wanted to remind the committee that on February 3rd, Senator Bradley moved that Senate Bill 227 be tabled, and it was voted and right now is laying on the table and would need to be taken off of the table to be moved forward, and that is the bill that has similar language to House Bill 91. I had the opportunity yesterday to speak with a mom of an officer who died by suicide, and in addition to the monetary death benefit. Making this change in law would do a lot to reducing the stigma and discrimination that is in the culture around first responders who suffer from mental health conditions and ultimately take their own lives. There is a family member here today in attendance watching this. It's the mom that I spoke to yesterday, and I was very happy to be able to talk with her about her son. I will leave it at that. Just request that the committee strongly support and ought to pass on House Bill 91. NAMI New Hampshire would also support the addition of corrections officers, or if the Senate felt that Senate Bill 227 was the better vehicle, would urge that the Senate move to have that taken off the table and passed so that the House could consider it this session. And with that, I will conclude my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you. The chair will call John McCallister. Good morning, Mr. McCallister.
Good morning, Madam Chair and the honorable members of the committee. I thank you for allowing me to take the time to talk in support of House Bill 91. For the record, my name is John McCallister. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire, and I'm a 22-year member of the Nashua Fire Department. As a leading firefighter organization in New Hampshire, the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire advocates for the health and safety of the brave men and women who protect the great citizens of this great state. In the fire service, we all know that we are routinely called to scenes of catastrophic incidents that involve severe injuries, tragic loss of human life, and even property loss. It is well documented that the effects of this exposure over time may result in psychological injuries and even suicide among our members. Tragically, we continue to see too many of our brothers and sisters lose their battles with post-traumatic stress disorder. Oftentimes, this results in an increase in harmful behaviors such as substance abuse, self-harm, or even suicide. We face the harsh reality that despite our best efforts to make awareness and prevention and provide a listening ear and a holding hand, that at times we just can't make the save with our own members. The International Association of Firefighters, as well as professional firefighters, have made great efforts and made great strides through the years to bring out this, to reduce the stigma amongst our members and allow those members to get the help that they are needed. But at times, it just doesn't help. In these instances, the responsibility now turns to the families of the loved ones that we have lost. These are the families who are left in the wake of a disaster that is so unimaginable that it turns their lives upside down. They are mourning the loss of their loved one while also wondering how they will pay the mortgage or put food on the table. These are the very same families who supported their loved one throughout the many nights, weekends, holidays, and birthdays that they worked away from home, many times for 48 hours straight. These are the very same families who laid awake at night wondering if their loved one would make it home from their last shift. And these are the very same families who watched their loved one grow distant and detached as they silently fought their battle with depression or PTSD. We owe it to these families to help provide some level of dignity and relief in their life. And while it won't bring their loved ones back, it will help ensure their families can begin to heal. The leaders of the Professional Firefighters in New Hampshire vow to continue our fight to educate our members and reduce the stigma surrounding behavioral health, and to do whatever we can to help prevent any further loss of life of this devastating illness. Until such time we can win this fight, we ask this committee to move and support House Bill 91. And I think I speak for everybody sitting in this room that we hope that we never have to award this benefit to any of our members' families. Thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. McCallister. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The chair will call Michael Mccary.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for taking my testimony today. My name is Michael Mccary, and I'm here on behalf of the National Correctional Employees Union to testify in support of House 91 and to respectfully ask the committee to consider including corrections officers in this important benefit. I want to thank the committee also for their leadership on the Senate version of this bill. The NCEU exclusively represents county correctional employees working in sheriff's departments from Pennsylvania to Maine. In New Hampshire, the NCEU currently has approximately 150 members working in Carroll, Grafton, Hillsborough, Merrimack, Rockingham, and Sullivan County. County corrections is an extremely stressful and difficult profession. When a person is taken into custody after their arrest, their first stop in the criminal justice system is often the county jail. These individuals are often in states of crisis. They may suffer from mental illness and addiction, and they're not yet used to being incarcerated. This makes this inmate population potentially volatile, and corrections officers must be constantly extremely vigilant. The men and women of county corrections spend many hours each day inside the walls of the jail, living in this heightened state of alertness and readiness. As we've detailed in our written testimony, a national study of more than 3,000 correctional employees by Desert Waters Correctional Outreach found much higher rates of PTSD and depression among correctional officers than among the general public. When PTSD and depression occur in tandem, there's an increased risk for suicide. The study found that PTSD and depression among correctional employees could often be linked to the performance of their work, specifically violence, injury, or death experienced on the job. Here in New Hampshire, the NCEU did have a member suicide. I believe it was approximately 5 years ago. Thankfully, among our membership, it has not been a regular occurrence, but it is something that happens, and it's tragic. Despite the risks, corrections officers show up to work each day under difficult conditions and perform a critical public safety role. Inside the jail, they are the first responders, and we ask you to please consider including them in this proposed benefit. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning, Mr. Mccary. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
I would just add, I was also signed up for 1319, and as the previous speaker noted, including correctional officers in that language, it would appear would obviate the need to have a special inclusion in this bill as well.
Okay, thank you. The chair will call David Goldstein.
Madam Chair, would it be all right if my colleague went first?
Your colleague is,
Justin Breton?
yes, please.
In this partner.
Yes, we see the partner. We're glad you're back.
Glad to be back in.
Looks like the dog has gotten a little bigger.
A little bit. Hopefully not wider.
Nah, just taller.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity to speak. As means of introduction, my name is Justin Breton. I am the Mental Health and Wellness Coordinator for the Manchester Police Department. I represent the New Hampshire Peer Support Network that is being currently, as we speak, being created across the state, as well as the New Hampshire Police Association. So I'm honored to be here today. I'm going to forego reading my written statement, and I'll be submitting that later,
Okay,
and just speak from the heart a little bit here today. But as a means of clarification, we would really like to respectfully let the committee know it's our understanding that Senate Bill 227 was an ought to pass. However, it was tabled pending this bill. So we just want to clarify that and make sure that everyone knows that this is Senate bill is still pending. So we'd like to speak today as a first responder, but also as the coordinator for our peer support team at the Manchester, New Hampshire Police Department. I personally and many members of my team have had to sit knee to knee with first responders who have found themselves in these very circumstances. I feel very fortunate to be able to say that we were able to assist our members through the crisis that they and their families were working through. And I feel very fortunate to be able to say that to you today and not have had to lose a colleague in that manner. I know that there has been some conversation and some sentiment that this bill may be an incentive for first responders and members of our Public Safety Committee to complete this act. However, I will be the first to tell you that based on my conversations and firsthand experience with our public safety members, that is the very last thing that is on their mind when they are in the deepest and darkest places that they have ever found themselves in. The reality is, and I don't want to be redundant to what many of my mentors and colleagues behind me have already spoken to, but the reality is that the New Hampshire public safety community recognizes that we are digging ourselves out of a culture that has been created over hundreds of years. We have failed amongst our professions to recognize the detriment and the effects that the exposure to New Hampshire's deepest and darkest places can have on us and our families. We are working exigently to remedy that, provide our members with supports, training in resiliency, training in mental health and wellness. We are creating programs that will support from within. We are working on a very robust peer support network that will be regionalized across the state, including all public safety members. And so I would like to clarify that we would also support adding corrections officers to this very important legislation because public safety, we all need to work together. We are all on the same mission. We need to support each other. It doesn't matter what color the stripes are on our uniforms. We are working very, very diligently to get these programs in place. We are trying to alleviate the stigma. Our colleagues at NAMI are working very closely with us to assist us in that, and the ability that they bring to help us eliminate the stigma is huge, and we need that support. We are working together in ways that I've never seen before. Many of the members behind you, we are on multiple committees to study incidents of PTSD and first responders. And to see, as a young law enforcement professional, to see everyone working together in this way as a community, as profession and culture is truly uplifting. And I think when we talk about supporting our members and increasing resiliency and making sure that our personnel have the supports and services that they need moving forward, this bill will truly help us show them that they are important, that their experiences matter, and that their families will truly be supported after a horrible tragedy like this may occur. So I greatly thank you for your consideration of this bill. I greatly appreciate the time to speak with you, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions for the committee.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Officer Breton. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And Chief Goldstein? It looks like the dog just got comfortable and he had to get up.
Very mellow.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is David Goldstein. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Franklin. I represent the New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police, and we support HB 91. On a historical note, this bill, known as HB 1122, about 2 years ago, in fact, did pass the House with a vote of 275 to 42. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it was tabled and kind of went away for a while. I'm going to go off script just for a second here, and I'm going to ask the committee members just to think of the word suicide. This is a difficult concept for most individuals to appreciate on any number of levels, whether it be personal, professional, or even clinical. And if I were to say that word and then say for the next 5 seconds, what is your reaction, and you don't have to share, what is your reaction? What words come to your mind when I say the word suicide? And these are some of the things that we have to confront and deal with. I've been a police officer for more than 42 years. Of that term, 23 years with the New Hampshire State Police, and for 12 of those years, I was a member both of the Major Crime Unit, dealt with many suicides, as well as the New Hampshire State Police SWAT Unit. My primary role there was as a crisis negotiator, and many of the calls that we responded to were suicide threats. I did lose 3 individuals during my career as a negotiator, and each one stays with me today. I have a bachelor's in psych, a master's in public health with a concentration in mental health issues, a PhD in counseling with a concentration in criminal justice and traumatology, or the study of trauma. I'm both a fellow and diplomate of the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, and I'm board certified by that organization in forensic traumatology, again, the study of trauma as it affects law enforcement individuals. I'm a member of the Southern New Hampshire Critical Incident Stress Management and Peer Support Team, which is primarily law enforcement oriented, as well as a member of the Granite State Critical Incident Stress Management Team, which deals with fire, law enforcement, EMS, and now medical professionals, physicians and nurses. I'm also a member of the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. And I'm here to tell you that in my role as a supporter and as a peer, I have lost colleagues to suicide. I've conducted empirical research correlating smoking behavior with self-destructive ideation at the VA hospital on Huntington Ave in Boston. I've conducted additional empirical research, authored and published a 500-plus page dissertation concerned with the delivery of stress, crisis, and trauma services for law enforcement. I've authored peer review articles relative to stress, trauma, and critical incidents. And I've held a number of adjunct professorships at, for example, Boston University on both the undergraduate and graduate level, New England College, and NHTI. I'm also an adjunct instructor at the New Hampshire Police Academy for both recruit and in-service, reference to stress management, dealing with mentally ill individuals, and forensic psychology. I'm a former adjunct instructor at the Reading, Massachusetts Municipal Police Academy in the fields of communication, de-escalation, and mental health. Other groups that hold similar beliefs are the Professional Police Executive Research Foundation, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the Bureau of Justice Administration, the National Symposium on Law Enforcement Officer Suicide and Mental Health, the New York Police Department, and the National Alliance on Mental Illness, as well as additional authors that believe there is a distinct and strong correlation between almost daily negative experiences and first responders and their suicidal behavior. And the numbers for law enforcement are staggering, and I'm just going to share law enforcement with you because you've heard and will hear from experts in other fields. In 2019, we actually had a banner year. We had a low of only 89 line-of-duty deaths. We had a high of 228 verified law enforcement suicides in the country. In 2020, we had 295 line-of-duty deaths and 186 reported or verified police suicides. And in 2021, we had 458 line-of-duty deaths and 173 reported and verified police suicides. And you ask yourself why. I'm going to put it in very simple terms. We prepare daily for battle. Most people do not dress the way I am dressed to go to work. There are less than 700,000 police officers in this country. This is how we dress on a daily basis. We live our lives in a fishbowl. We are at the beck and call of everybody at any time, 24/7, 365. We have a front row seat to despair. We're usually first on scene, and we see people on their worst days. And most of the time, people do not come to my police station and say, thank you for doing a great job. It's more along the lines of, I have a problem and I need help. We ride the incident roller coaster on a daily basis, and we respond to call after call. I have a police department of 21 police officers. I handle 20 to 25,000 calls for service a year. Do the back of the envelope arithmetic. It's incredible work that these men and women do. It's also important to mention that the United States military now awards survivors of active duty personnel who complete suicide with the usual $400,000 benefit. And one of the articles I passed out deals with firefighters, and I'm going to leave it to that. And I'm going to close with obviously asking that the committee vote this bill ought to pass, but I'm going to read just some of the language from 1122 that I think is very poignant. Relative to death benefits of first responders who die from suicide, it is a well-documented fact that first responder suicides are outdistancing first responder line-of-duty deaths on a national level. This bill addresses the presumption that first responders who complete the act of suicide have engaged in such behavior as a result of the constant stress, critical incidents, and trauma inherent in the professions of law enforcement, firefighting, emergency medical services practitioners, and rescue squad personnel. The underlying precepts of this bill follow the similar considerations for active duty military personnel and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Chief. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 91? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Oh, sure. we have Representative Emmerich? Okay, I don't think we have Representative Emmerich. Oh, that's you? I'm sorry? Are you Representative Emmerich? Okay. Okay. Okay, she's, okay. All right, let me know when you're ready. I'll have to introduce this bill. Okay, you're all set? We're going to open the public hearing on House Bill 1319. Is Representative Emmerich here? Okay, I guess not. All right. Is Representative Emmerich here? Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and introduce this bill. Good morning. My name is Sharon Carson. I have the pleasure of representing Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Londonderry, Hudson, and Auburn. And I have for your consideration this morning House Bill 1319 FN, which seeks to add correctional officers, probation officers, and correctional line personnel classified under Group 2 in the retirement system to persons granted death benefits if killed in the performance of his or her duties. Thank you. Okay, next we're going to go to Lynn Cusack. Okay, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Lynn Marie Cusack. I am the Director of Professional Standards at the New Hampshire Department of Corrections. And I'm here today to encourage this committee to support and move forward the House Bill 1319, which moves to expand the definition in RSA 21I 29A, where it defines what a police officer is, to also include any corrections officer, probation and parole officer, or correctional line personnel that already are in the Group 2 insurance or Group 2 retirement benefit to the definition of what a police officer is. As we've already talked about in House Bill 91, the role of a corrections officer is that of a first responder inside a corrections facility. A corrections officer or those that are on the front lines in the prison are individuals, or probation and parole officers on the front lines of dealing with individuals who are felons out in the community, are dealing with individuals who, as we've already heard, are gang members. And in prisons, those gangs are concentrated into smaller areas. There are individuals that have substance abuse problems, and in the prisons have an uncanny ability to bring drugs into the facility as part of the gang type indoctrination, where the drugs are being sold, the drugs are being used by those individuals, which makes corrections officers or those individuals on the front line dealing with them in a precarious situation every day when they enter the facility. What we've done is, if this bill passes the way that it's written, it again would obviate the need to include that special characterization in the bill that we just talked about, House Bill 91. I did not, in the presentation of the materials that I've already given you, talk about the numbers that we see in the corrections field, line of duty deaths. I've taken a look at a page called Officer Down Memorial Page, and have gone back to 2015 and looked at the number of deaths nationwide from the perspective of law enforcement, and then including in there corrections officers. In 2015, for example, there were 167 deaths reported on this page of law enforcement. 6 of those were corrections officers. Those corrections officers, the highest number, 50% of them, were killed by an assault in a prison setting. There were also individuals that were killed in the line of duty in an automobile accident. In 2016, 181 deaths of law enforcement. 10 of them were corrections officers. Again, the majority of them were from assaults in prison. One of them included a stabbing, and one included gunfire, where an individual obtained a weapon from a corrections officer and then used that weapon against them. And one of them was a canine that supports the corrections officers. In 2017, 186 deaths occurred in law enforcement line of duty. 9 of them were corrections officers. The most in that year, or the majority in that year, were from heart attacks associated with the daily routines of the individual. One of them was a gunfire, and one also was a canine that was killed by toxicity poisoning. So we have 4 canines in our facility, and they are drug-sniffing dogs. With the high rate of fentanyl that's coming into our prisons and into the state of New Hampshire, we would also potentially see that type of death. We're not asking that our canines, though, be given any type of death benefit, but just goes to show that and illustrate that we do have a significant issue with potential drugs and our officers that touch that fentanyl or carfentanil not knowing that it's included in some type of correspondence that may be coming into a resident. In 2018, the statistics show that 187 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty, 12 of them corrections officers. 2019, 157 officers, law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty, 6 of them being corrections officers. And again, the highest number were from assaults, and there was 1 explosion that year. In 2020, we see an increase in law enforcement deaths, and that 2021 and 2022, and those deaths were COVID-related. 66 of the 401 law enforcement deaths were corrections officers. In 2021, there were 575 law enforcement deaths, 67 of those being corrections officers. Again, the greatest percentage were COVID-related, but we still saw assaults. And in 2022, there have been 4 corrections officers' deaths nationwide. The point that I'm giving you from illustrating this are they're not a significant number of corrections officers that pass away and would need this benefit. But the benefit, if available to them, is critical. It's critical to their families. It's critical to the work that they do every day and putting their lives on the line, just like any other law enforcement that is in the community. So by creating this carve-out or this expansion of the definition, it would assist all the families that might experience such a tragic event in their lives. If there are no questions, I'd be happy to.
Okay, yes, hold on. Thank you very much for your testimony. Senator Reagan has a question.
So correctional officers are not eligible for a federal benefit?
A federal benefit?
Yeah.
I don't see that. I don't know the answer to that, Senator Reagan. I don't.
Okay. Senator Prentice?
I've actually been trying to, there's a federal safety officer's benefit, it's a public safety officer benefit, and I've been trying to search this over here to see if there is coverage. So
I know that corrections officers have been added to other benefits from a federal perspective,
okay.
But it's not that state benefit, just like any other law enforcement officer would get that federal benefit. Law enforcement in New Hampshire, this adds to that.
Okay. I'll keep looking.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Are there any further questions for the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Carson.
The chair will call Michael Mccary.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you again. My name is Michael Mccary on behalf of the National Correctional Employees Union. I'll keep this brief. I think the prior speaker summarized things quite well, and I touched on this in my previous comments. The NCU supports this bill 1319 for many of the reasons that I testified to before on the prior bill. And I again want to thank the committee for recognizing the difficult and dangerous nature of the work performed by correctional officers and the volatile population of inmates that they are often charged with the care, custody, and supervision of. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Reagan.
Same question, federal benefit.
That's a good question, Senator Reagan, and I do not know the answer to it, and I will try to get that for the committee. But again, this would be similar to other law enforcement. This would be separate and distinct from any federal benefit.
Okay. You all set? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony. The chair will call Katie Horgan.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kate Horgan. I serve as the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Association of Counties, which is all of your elected and county appointed officials. And today I'm here on behalf of your county correctional officers. We are in support of this bill. Just for a little bit of background, the county correctional officers have not lost an officer in the line of duty in about 60 years. So it is not something that happens very frequently, but it does happen, and we would appreciate your support on that bill, and I would echo the comments of Ms. Cusack and Mr. McCary.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Horgan. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Reagan.
I don't know either, Senator Reagan. I will find out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other members of the public who would like to speak to House Bill 1319? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Wow. He's in favor. Again, no reps. Maybe I'll have you test. Maybe I'll have you, Representative Goley, introduce the bill, because it looks like Representative Lanzara.
Yes, and that's why I came down, Senator.
Thank you.
Sure
You
if
read my
somebody would
mind.
be
It was
here, and
telepathic.
Actually, part of the amended version is one of my bills amended into it. That's why it was
Okay.
amended.
Okay, let me know when you're ready, Chantal. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing on House Bill 1497 and recognize Representative Goley to introduce the bill. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning. Good morning, members of the committee. I'm here today, for the record, Representative Jeff Goley, representing Hillsborough District 8, and here to introduce House Bill 1497 as amended by the House. 1497 came over to eDNA on the House side, and what it changes in the statute is currently you have to reach eligibility to retire before you can fill out the forms for your retirement pre-selection.
Mm-hmm.
And what this does is simply allow you to fill that out at any time, even prior to your reaching the age of, for retirement. The issue was that those individuals had to know the date, and if they missed that date, and there has been instances where someone reaches their 20 years or their 25 years and they're able to retire, the age is to retire, they're at the age where they can retire, meet the criteria to retire, must fill out this form. And if they don't fill it out at that time and something happens, then the survivor benefit goes away and is lost. This allows them to fill out that form at any time prior to retirement. So they could come in day one once they join the retirement system, fill out their survivorship form, and not have to worry about remembering when they reach that 20th year in one day of eligibility to retire to fill out the form. So it's just a little clarification in paperwork. It doesn't increase benefits for anybody, doesn't decrease benefits. It just makes sure that if something happens to that individual after they reach eligibility, that their survivorship benefits go to who they are guaranteed to go to at that time. And the second part of the bill, and there'll be folks behind me that can clarify and speak probably a little better than I am, but the second part of the bill was, in the amended version just clarifies what happened was when I retired in the midst of the COVID pandemic and the retirement system was not open at the time for people to walk in for walk-in service. There was a little delay in getting your average final compensation numbers out to you. And it took 6 months before I finally got my final numbers. They did it based on what my average was, and until they got my sick time and vacation time accruals sent in from the city of Manchester and all that calculated was 6 months. So when I received my final numbers, included in that envelope was a note saying that I had 180 days from when I filed for retirement to change my benefit status. Well, 120 days, the 6 months was well past 120 days. So if I wanted to, after I had my final numbers, I couldn't. So I reached out to the retirement system and asked them if we could make it, when I receive final numbers, that the individual has the 128 days to make that decision, which seemed reasonable. And they agreed, and because at that point I had no recourse. There was nothing I could do. They said, that's the law, that's the way it's written, and that's how it has to go. And I just thought it was unfair, and I'm trying to fix that for the rest of the folks behind me, that doesn't happen to them. So that was the other portion of the amendment. We just put two bills together, amending it and bringing it into this one package.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Representative Goley. We really appreciate that. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
The chair will call Marty Carlin. I know, I thought we fixed this as well. I know, that's what I don't get. We'll ask him, because I remember this from a few years ago.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Marty Carlin, representing the New Hampshire Retirement System. The retirement system doesn't have a position on House Bill 1497, but I did sign up to give a little background and answer any questions about the benefit that the committee may have. Representative Goley spelled it out in his introduction, but the first part of the bill deals with what's called pre-selection of a survivorship option. And under current law, anyone who's eligible for service retirement, so they've reached the minimum age or the minimum age in service, can fill out what's called a pre-selection form. And if they were to pass away while still working before filing their retirement application, 100% of the benefit would be paid to their beneficiary. So it'd be as if the person was getting that deceased member's pension. The law right now only allows that designation once you're eligible for service retirement. So, we tell people in our presentations, and we try to promote, the fact that this benefit exists because it's something that the member has to take a step to. It's not an automatic benefit. Is get the form, fill it out, get it ready, put a forever stamp on it, mail it to us, 2 days before your birthday. But again, there are people who either are unaware of the benefit or don't get it in. So this change would open it up so that anybody at any point in their career could designate the pre-selection option on the beneficiary form. It wouldn't take effect if the person were to pass away in service prior to service retirement eligibility. There's other statutory death benefits that are automatic, and those would be in play for those folks. But it would allow somebody to check it and forget it essentially earlier in their career. And so to the extent that more people will do that than are doing the separate pre-selection form now, there may be a very negligible increase in benefit costs. But fortunately, we have very few in-service deaths, deaths of people who were working. There's some numbers in the handout. I won't go through them all, but it's a small number. Not all of those deaths are service retirement eligible people. We've only added, I think, 37 people since 2015, to the roles who died in service, eligible for service retirement. So, it's on the rounding, on an employer rate. It wouldn't really be noticeable for a cost impact on that. The other piece, as Representative Goley mentioned, right now the law says a member has 120 days from their effective date of retirement to change their survivorship option benefit, either change the percentage or even change the person, whatever change after that. It's pretty much locked in. There are a few cases of death of a spouse or divorce where a benefit can be modified after the 120 days, but those are sort of exceptions in the law. So, and the effective date of retirement is always the first of the month. So, what happens is, despite our best intentions, we either don't finalize all benefits within 120 days. I mean, that's our goal. Every July we have a massive influx of teachers retire, so that just puts us back for that month, but then it pushes it back. And also, if employers are late or negligent and they're not sending in the person's final pays or anything else that would go into the pension calculation, we can't finalize the benefit until we get that information from employers. So there are cases where their preliminary benefit and their final benefit may be significantly different, enough that would have chosen had a different option had they known what their benefit was going to be. So this section of the bill changes the 120-day window from the effective date of retirement till the initial notice of final benefit from NHRS. So the person has all the final numbers in front of them when they're making that, sort of lifetime decision about what to do about a survivorship option. And again, indeterminable, in certainly negligible cost if this goes in. We don't expect to see people, trying to get an extra $100 for a couple of months and changing their benefit or something foolish like that, because, it's only in case, most people are going to stick with what they have. But in situations like Representative Goley's, the numbers may be different enough where, a different choice would have been in order. So glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Carlin. Are there any questions? Mr. Carlin, I thought we had addressed the issue of the election of the benefits before. I remember a bill, and it was a few years ago, because we had folks come in and talk about how they only had that one opportunity to sign up for the benefit and name the beneficiary. But then, as we all know, life changes, and your spouse might die, and you would like to give that benefit to a child, or if you happen to remarry, that under the current system at the time, they weren't allowed to do that. And I remember legislation to change that. Was there an issue with that, or is this just a new problem?
This is a new issue. There were some bills in the past, in the last say 3 to 5 years that addressed issues of divorce retirees where the spouse refused to relinquish the benefit even though it wasn't court ordered to continue, or of people who chose a non-spouse beneficiary and then couldn't remove that person. That was a change to the law. There was a bill, I think it was just last year, that didn't make it out of finance. It might have gone through eDNA and died in finance, that it skirted around the first issue in this bill, and there was an amendment that basically that would do this last year that just sort of kind of went off the tracks in finance as you got closer to crossover, because there was some uncertainty about it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Carlin.
Thank you.
The chair will call John McCallister.
Good morning, Madam Chair, once again, and the honorable members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 1497. For the record, my name is John McCallister, and I serve as Secretary Treasurer for the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire. I'm a 22-year member of the National Fire Department. Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire has submitted written testimony on this bill, so I'll keep my remarks short and even shorter, since Representative Goldstein and Marty Conlon had done a really good job at summing up the bill. The couple things I do just want to add is that this is not a new or enhanced benefit to our members. This is simply a process to streamline the paperwork issue that may happen at the state retirement system. So that sums up my testimony today. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Reagan.
So can you tell us what the federal benefit is?
I cannot tell you what the federal benefit
You're
is.
not aware of the federal, you're a professional firefighter and you're not aware of the federal benefit.
For correction officers, I am not.
No, the federal benefit for safety officers.
Oh, it's $400,000. I thought you were being specific to correction officers.
Okay, are there any further questions?
Any other questions?
Seeing none, thank you very much for your
Thank you for
testimony.
your time.
The chair will call Arthur Beaudry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Arthur Beaudry. I represent the New Hampshire State Permanent Firefighters Retirement Association. I am here today to speak in favor of House Bill 1497 as amended in the House. I would like to give the committee a little background about myself. I'm a retired captain from the Manchester Fire Department, and I was a trustee of the New Hampshire Retirement System Board of Trustees from 1988 to 2001. First and foremost, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the representatives for sponsoring this legislation. Some of you may or may not know that the Manchester Fire Department recently had two very tragic incidents happen in the department. Sadly, two firefighters had taken their own lives within months of each other. It was due to these tragic losses that the language changes you see in this bill come to realization. Under current law, if a member has not signed a pre-option beneficiary paperwork when they attain the age and years of service making them eligible for a service retirement, this member's spouse would lose 50% of the member's service retirement if death were to occur before the member's retirement. A member could be driving to Concord to sign his or her paperwork, get in an accident, get killed, and their spouse would lose out on half of the member's earned pension benefit. The new language will allow any active member to select an option that would cover their member's spouse and/or children to receive the maximum pension benefit allowable that he or she would have received prior to the member's death. The family of a deceased member should not be punished due to a member's untimely death. I ask that the committee please pass this legislation so that untimely death of a New Hampshire Retirement System member will not put an undue hardship on the member's family. I want to thank you for listening to my testimony. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning, Mr. Beaudry. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing
Thank you
none,
very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1497? Okay, seeing none, close the public hearing. Thank you. Okay. There we go. Let's see, Mark, 2. Yeah, they're awfully noisy up there. It sounds like they're having a dance party or something. Pardon?
I don't think it's a party.
No, I don't know. It's just, you can hear a lot of foot stomping. Yeah, maybe. And let me know when you're all set, Chantal. Don't worry. Okay? Okay. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing on House Bill 536 and recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Schultz. Good morning, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to be here and present this bill in particular. You will hear a story that inspired this bill, an unfortunate incident that is unfortunate not so uncommon for the public works employees who do respond quickly to incidents as well. That at natural disasters, at accidents on the highway, at so many key moments, public works employees are there. And the memorial, oh, I should say, hi, I'm Representative Chris Schultz of Concord. I apologize. And I think of that, my district, because the memorial to public works employees is almost in my district, close enough. On average, we lose a public work employee every 2 years, roughly. And considering that and the story that inspired this bill, that while it won't benefit the person who passed, it certainly fixes an issue that that family faced and brings into alignment without reclassification what should be the honor and remuneration to the survivors of any public works employee who passes on the job for work-related reasons. This was a bill that had strong bipartisan support in the beginning of COVID, and you could say died a COVID death, like a lot of good pieces of legislation. But unfortunately, it was put together with bills that were partisan, or we probably would have already passed it. So here it is, with strong bipartisan support from the House. And it is an honor, like I said, to present this bill. And I'm happy to answer any questions. At the end of my testimony and questions, though, I will need to get back to the House, and I'll defer questions to my friends sitting directly behind me in the front row. They should be able to answer any questions you may have that come up after I depart for House votes.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? I just have a quick question.
Sure.
The bill was amended in House Finance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I will. I don't know the details about that. I wasn't able to present it at that time, and my colleague who did, I don't know. Do you happen to know the answers to that? Yeah, the only amendment was to add when it would be enacted, which would be July 1st of 2022.
Thank you.
I apologize, I've forgotten it was that simple.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you so much.
The chair will call Marty Carlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Marty Carlin from NHRS. I'll be super brief. I just signed up more to clarify in case there's any questions later on. This bill has very little to do with NHRS. Only Section 2 pertains to the retirement system, and that is removing a workers' comp offset to a death benefit pension paid to a surviving member of someone who was killed. That offset is already is only in effect for Group 1 now. Group 2, it already is waived, so it would bring parity to Group 1 and Group 2 by removing the offset. So, and currently, I don't believe there's anybody subject to that offset. There have been cases in the past, but it's fortunately rare.
Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Carlin. Are there any questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. The chair will call David Rodriguez. Rodriguez. Okay. Thought there was an S there.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is David Rodriguez, Director of Operations for the Department of Transportation, and thank you for hearing my testimony on this bill. The Department of Transportation supports this bill. Presidential Directive 8 HSPDA identifies public works employees as first responders. The language of this bill defines public works employees in the spirit of this presidential directive. New Hampshire DOT and public works industry in New Hampshire are committed to safety of all our workers. However, there is no doubt that when conditions beyond our control are at their worst, we do not stay home. We ask our people to go out and keep working, to keep essential infrastructure open and functioning. Many of our people work next to high-speed traffic a few feet away from motorists who refuse to slow down, move over, and pay attention. Sadly, since 2000, New Hampshire DOT has lost 8 employees while on duty. An industry group leader, Environmental Health and Safety, lists the top 10 most dangerous occupations. Of these jobs, Public Works employees complete tasks directly defined in 8 of those occupations. I want to thank the members of the committee for taking up this important issue. Unfortunately, a couple of recent incidents underscore the hazards we face. On Friday morning on I-93 southbound in Salem, we had a service patrol vehicle pulled over, fully in the shoulder, all lights on, message board on, protecting an oversized load that had broken down. A box van traveling near 70 miles an hour lost control of their vehicle, sideswiped our service patrol vehicle while the driver was inside and buckled in. Fortunately, he escaped without injury, but that's where we ask our people to go, where the hazard is, to provide protection for your families, for the travelers of our state who may be broken down on the road. Just this morning at our Rochester toll booth, a truck came through and struck the toll booth with a toll taker in the booth. Again, fortunately, that toll taker is uninjured. But these are the situations we put our employees in every day, and we do everything we can to keep them safe. And I assure you, this is a benefit that nobody wants to collect. Thank you for your consideration, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. The chair will call Susie Nord. Good morning, Ms. Nord.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. My name, for the record, is Susie Nord, and I work for the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health. And we do support this bill, and I'm here on behalf of Allison Wooten, who unfortunately was woke up this morning with fevers and chills and decided not to come, which I'm sure we all appreciate. So she asked me to speak on her behalf. So I'll do the best I can. In July of 2016, Allison was in Arizona at a business trip when she got the call that her husband, Tom, who worked for the Northfield Department of Public Works, had been killed. It took her between 12 and 15 hours to fly home. And she told me the whole time she was thinking there must be some mistake, this can't be true. When she got home, she found out that her husband had been at work for the Northfield DPW and had been crushed. His pelvis had been crushed. He didn't die right away, but he died shortly after in the hospital, and she never got to see him again. Sorry. Now, this is a hard story for me because I've since grown to care very much for these families and the family, and I feel very much like I know Tom, although I never met him. Tom was the rock of their family. They moved to New Hampshire a few years prior to his death because it was a sort of semi-retirement for them. He wanted to be closer to New Hampshire because he was an avid fisherman and snowmobiler, and so they considered it sort of a semi-retirement because he was young enough that they couldn't fully retire. But he got his job with the Northfield DPW, and he really, I think my understanding is he really liked working there. And the people there liked him. He was great. He was very popular. And what happened on that morning in July of 2016, and this is something that Allison found out later and was understandably upset about, is that rather than the town of Northfield spending the $500 to move a trailer that they had for storage that they moved twice a year to one place and then back from that place, it was the back of a 18-wheeler tractor trailer, rather than renting a trailer to tow it where it needed to go, they would have the Department of Public Works employees carry the trailer between the front of two buckets, which my hands are shaking because I'm nervous, but this is pretty much what it was like. And the trailer tipped, and Tom went to straighten it and was crushed. For $500, Tom wouldn't have died because it would have been done the right way. And that has been on her mind ever since, not to mention the fact that her husband lived to know what happened. But what happened to her after 15 hours or 12 hours on a plane, wondering if this really did happen, was she became inundated with papers, as anyone is when a spouse dies, as particularly on the job. And you get things from the insurance company, you get things, if it's a private sector employee, you get things from OSHA. As a public sector employee, she received information from the Department of Labor, who did a very cursory investigation. You're inundated, and yet at the same time, you've lost, in her case, half their income, and you still have the same bills that you always have. And then add to all of this, you know, you're trying to deal with the death of a loved one, and finally, they said to her, "Do you want his pension or do you want workers' comp?" And she's like, "Excuse me? He died at work, he deserves workers' comp, and he paid into his pension. What, I have to decide?" Yes, she has to decide. And so this is just one of many, many kinds of decisions that people in this situation make. And because of my job, I meet a number of people like Allison. And this is the piece that is one of the harder pieces that they just don't anticipate. I think everybody can imagine what it's like to not have their loved one and empathizes with that. But I think understanding that you're making lifelong decisions that affect your finances, your family's finances, in this situation when you're so traumatized and overwhelmed and heartbroken. I guess to understand, it's not about money. It sounds like money, you know, but it's not. There isn't a single person that I've spoken to. And I've worked for National Kosh now for almost 6 years. And I meet people all the time in this position. There isn't a single one who's like, "I'm glad I got that money." They want their loved one back. And the money, what it is basically it's a form of respect from the employer saying, "We value you. We honor that you gave your job for your life for your job." And so with that, I guess the last piece I should address is the adding Tom Wooten and workers like him to being considered first responders. At the opening of the memorial just around the corner in front of the DOT, where Tom's name is, I believe at the time was the most recent one added when it was opened. The governor gave a speech thanking the first responders. There was a sign saying, "DOT, our first responders." The federal government has a bill, I gave you my testimony, so I can't quote you the number, that calls Department of Transportation members first responders. They are the ones who clear the road so that the fire trucks can get through, or so that the police can get through, or the ambulance can get through. They're out at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're doing their jobs. She very much considered Tom a first responder. And so I'll answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Nord. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak to House Bill 536? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Representative Schuett is not here. No, I can't let Marty introduce the bill. No, I'm not gonna do it. It's not a big deal. Okay.
Representative Schuett did email me that she was going to be tied up upstairs.
Yeah. Okay, so when you're ready, Chantel, just let me know. Okay. Going to go ahead and open the public hearing on House Bill 1318. Representative Schuett is not available, so I will introduce the bill. Good morning. I'm here to introduce House Bill 1318 FN Local relative to penalties for employer noncompliance with retirement system requirements. This bill establishes a penalty for noncompliance with certain requirements for the administration of the retirement system applicable to retirement system employers, and this bill is a request of the New Hampshire retirement system. The chair will call Marty Carlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, my name is Marty Carlin, representing NHRS. This is the rare occasion where I'm speaking in favor of a bill on behalf of the retirement system. This legislation was requested by our Board of Trustees, and Representative Schuett was gracious enough to sponsor us for it. For many years, NHRS has had statutory authority to assess reporting penalties for employers regarding the monthly reporting of wage and contribution information. Back in 2018, we had similar language for late reporting of retiree data. This actually, I think, came from this committee in House Bill 561, the amendments that this committee put forth through that. This bill would add a penalty for areas not covered under the existing penalty statute for late or incorrect reporting of certain data. And actually, this ties back to House Bill 1497 testimony, the situation with Representative Goley. If we don't receive final wage, certified information from the employer, we can't finalize benefits, in a timely manner, things like that. So what the penalty this penalty would be used for would be for cases like that where, despite the best efforts working with the employer, we don't have the information to finalize someone's benefit after a certain point. Also, we have had issues in the past with receiving corrected data for past years based on audit findings. When we came in and did a compliance audit and saw that there was misreporting, the employer, they have a lot to do, obviously, and we understand that. But, we're just not getting the data, so we can't correct these member records and move forward and get that cleaned up. So those are examples of what we would use this penalty for. Basically, we would, request this data from the employer as we do now in the normal course. And after a certain point, if we haven't heard back, this would allow us to send them a notice of a pending penalty they'd have 30 days to get back to us with a good reason why they haven't been able to provide the data, and the penalty wouldn't take effect, until after that. They have the chance to, so nobody's going to get dinged, you're 5 minutes late, type of thing. We have obviously a long-term relationship with our employers, and we don't want to nickel and dime them, if you will, with penalties. It's not like it's a large sum for a large employer. $25 a day penalty for Manchester is different than it would be for Bethlehem or something. But that said, we are fairly forgiving with all of our penalties with employers because we want to educate them and make sure they have the tools and the information they do to provide it going forward. We want to antagonize them, but we thought that this sort of gap in our penalty would be helpful in certain cases where certain employers are not being very forthcoming or helpful or willing to work with us on things. Again, this wouldn't add employer contribution costs or anything like that. The only employers who would pay the penalties are the ones who aren't giving us the information we need. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. And the handout was just sort of a statement on the background.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Carlin. Are there any questions for Mr. Carlin? Senator Reagan.
Marty, you think $25 is gonna make people do anything?
We hope so. I got the same question from the House. They thought the penalty should have been larger as well. Again, it's a daily penalty, so if it, after, a couple of weeks, you're talking a few $100s, and for a small town, that's probably not insignificant, for a
So
big
that
city.
would kind of encourage them to get their act together.
Yeah, that's exactly. This is a stick that we don't want to have to use, but we have it available if needed.
There's a provision in the bill that says that it's somebody's discretion to reduce that too.
Yes, so if there was, a case where it was, a year later, we could reduce the amount, based on the circumstances of the employer or the issue, yeah.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Carlin.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1318? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
I'd like to get an amendment to change that to $200.
That's fine. I thought $25 was. I'm sorry. We're not too far behind. We're on the last one. Okay. We don't have the representative again. Representative Pearson. Okay. Are you all set? Okay. Going to go ahead and open House Bill 1030. The prime sponsor, Representative Pearson, is not available, so I will go ahead and introduce the bill. For the record, my name is Sharon Carson. I have the pleasure of representing Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Londonderry, Hudson, and Auburn. And I have today for your consideration House Bill 1030, relative to licensure by alternative experience for licensed nursing assistant. This bill clarifies the requirements for alternative experience licensure of nursing assistants. I don't have anybody that has signed up to speak, although I do have someone named Joe Shoemaker. Would you like to come up and talk about this bill, please? Because we don't have any testimony. Thank you very much, Mr. Shoemaker.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I really don't have anything further to add than what the Chair added this morning. We support this bill. We support most bills that focus on workforce development. I think this bill the original bill came last session, and as the Chair stated, this just clarifies it really for those looking to be licensed through an alternative means. It really doesn't change anything at all. Again, just clarifies the language. So we certainly support the bill, and we'll do all we can to, again, make sure potential licensees, it's very clear to them, the ways they can become licensed and so forth. As you know, right now there is a significant workforce shortage, primarily in the nursing field, especially with LNAs. So anything at all we can do to make sure that those through this alternative means, and this is looking at folks with military experience and making sure they are aware that they can become licensed relatively easily.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? I just have a comment. I remember this bill, and there needed to be some things that were added, and I think this bill goes ahead and makes the additions to the bill, so it would open it up to all services. I think at the time, they had only mentioned the Army and the Air Force.
Correct.
And they had left out the Marines and the Navy and the Coast Guard. So I think this bill filled the loop.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So are there any further questions? House Bill 1030? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1030? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we're done for our business today. Thank you all very much for being here.
You want her to do it? You want me to do it?
You can do it if you want.
I don't care.
Okay, it's up to you.
See you later.
Yep. Take care. We didn't go too far. We're not too far.